Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yato Niviyad Vitaratascha Deso Vigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Surayaha Tejo Varimudam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Masha Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param O my Lord, Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma projita kaitravatra paramo nirmatsranam satam Vedyam vastavam atra vastu Shivadam tapa trayon mulanam Srimad Bhagvatam Mahamuni krite Kim va purir ishvaraha Sadyo hridi avarujite tra Krite behi susuvistakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam Muhur Aho Raskabu Vibhavikaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarine juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hiryanta Stohi Bhadrani Vidunati Suhitsatam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engaged in hearing of him. Nastapresu abhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the emotional service of the Lord. Tadarajastamo bhava kamalobadayaschaye cheta etarinavidam stitvam sattve prasiditi. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance. And thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso Bhagavat bhakti yogataha Bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarvasamsaya, siyante jasyakarmani, drista evat manishware. Thus, bhakti yoga serves the heart not of material affection, and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing about Krishna from devotees, therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of God, of Krishna. Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 4, verse number 2. Atmajaya sutagara pasu dravina bandhusu raje chavikale nityam virudam amatama jaho. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. This thing is making a noise. Just turn it off. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Parikshit, as a result of his wholehearted attraction for Lord Krishna, was able to give up all deep-rooted affection for his personal body. Turn it back on when we at the end of the class. Okay. Deep-rooted affection for his personal body, his wife, his children, his palace, his animals like horses and elephants, his treasury house, his friends and relatives, and his undisputed kingdom. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. To become liberated means to become free from dehatma buddhi, the illusory attachment for personal bodily coverings and everything connected with the body, namely wife, children, and all other engagements. One selects a wife for bodily comforts, and the result is children. For wife and children, one requires a dwelling place, and as such, a residential house is also necessary. Animals like horses, elephants, cows, and dogs are all household animals, and a householder has to keep them as as household paraphernalia. In modern civilization, the horses and elephants have been replaced by cars and conveyances with considerable horsepower. To maintain all the household affairs, one has to increase the bank balance and be careful about the treasury house. And in order to display the opulence of material assets, one has to keep good relations with friends and relatives, as well as become very careful about maintaining the status quo. This is called material civilization of material attachment. Devotion for Lord Krishna means negation of all material attachments, as detailed above. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Maharaj Parikshit was awarded all material amenities and an undisputed kingdom in which to enjoy the undisturbed position of king. But by the grace of the Lord, he was able to give up all connections with material attachment. That is the position of a pure devotee. Maharaj Parikshit, due to his natural affection for Lord Krishna as a devotee of the Lord, was always executing his royal duties on behalf of the Lord, and as a responsible king of the world, he was always careful to see that the influence of Kali would not enter his kingdom. A devotee of the Lord never thinks of his household paraphernalia as his own, but surrenders everything for the service of the Lord, thereby living as these under a devotee's care, get the opportunity for God realization by the management of a devotee master. Attachment for household paraphernalia and for Lord Krishna go poorly together. One attachment is the path of darkness, and the other attachment is the path of light. Where there is light, there is no darkness, and where there is darkness, there is no light. But an expert devotee can turn everything to the path of light by an attitude of service to the Lord. And the best example here is the Pandavas. Maharaj Yudhisthira and householders like him can turn everything to light by dovetailing so-called material assets in the service of the Lord. But one who is not trained or is unable to turn everything to the service of the Lord, Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe, must give up all material connections before he can be fit to hear and chant the glories of the Lord, or in other words, one who has seriously heard Srimad Bhagvatam for even one day, like Maharaj Parikshit, from a fit personality like Sukadeva Goswami, may be able to lose all affinity for material things. There is no utility simply in imitating Maharaj Parikshit and hearing Bhagavatam from a professional man, even for 700 years. To take Srimad Bhagavatam as a means of maintaining family expenditure is the grossest type of nama aparada offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. Sarva subha kriya samyam api pramadaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, there are 2 points here that should be understood. One is the devotee who understands that everything belongs to Krishna. So all these paraphernalias, wife, house, cars or animals, land, clothing, gadgets, everything belong to Krishna. So therefore the devotee is trained how to use everything in the service of Krishna. And the sincere devotee has a life of 24/7 engaged in dovetailing everything in Krishna's service. And then there is the attached person who, although having all these things, does not exactly understand that they belong to Krishna and does not completely dovetail everything in the service of Krishna. For such a person, it's very necessary to completely renounce all these things. So, if one understands everything belongs to Krishna and uses everything wisely in Krishna's service, then they're already renounced in a positive way. If one is not, let's say blessed with such understanding and practical application of it, then they must reject everything, as Maharaj Parikshit did. So, and very abruptly. In either case, when one is approaching death, they must completely disassociate themselves. So someone who's always practiced the knowledge that everything belongs to Krishna and has dedicated their whole life to using everything in the service of Krishna, it's easy to just walk away from all that. If someone is attached to it, then it's much harder, and they need a lot of help from someone like Sukadeva Goswami, who will sit down with the person for in the case of Sukadeva Goswami, 7 days, and hear Srimad Bhagvatam, and speak Srimad Bhagvatam, so that day after day, 7 days, they lose their attachment to all these paraphernalia. So, but Maharaj Parikshit was very fortunate because he had a vision of the Lord right in the womb of his mother, and therefore Parikshit means the examiner. For the rest of his life he was looking for the Lord, always expecting to see him or hoping to see him. So he was very fortunate. We're not fortunate like that. So we always need the help of bona fide gurus, Siksha and Diksha gurus, and regular hearing and chanting on a daily basis to develop the change of heart. The change of heart is a very important point. Whatever is most dear to us, we hold in our heart. So if we have this strong attachment to name and fame and material, let's say, extensions of our desires in the form of a wife, house, children, all those things, then it's like almost impossible to break such attachments. And it requires very, very intense association with devotees and regular hearing and chanting, etc., etc. Now, this is equally hard for men and women. It's not only men that have to break away from all these attachments. So, therefore, the natural way to do it is by always staying in contact with saintly persons and regularly hearing and chanting, so that the strong attachments to material things in the wrong way for personal sense gratification does not take hold. And this process is a daily process. We have to hear on a regular basis this Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita to be convinced over and over again that nothing is mine, everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore everything should be used in Krishna's service. And to do that, one needs to have specific knowledge of how to use everything in Krishna's service. Nirbande Krishna Sambande. So one is no longer in nirbande means no longer attached to material things by becoming attached to Krishna, sambande. So the more we're attached to Krishna, the less we're attached to material things, although we're surrounded by material things and we're dealing with them every day. but we've learned this transcendental art of using and engaging everything in Krishna's service. So this is a great science, and it is not easily understood because we have a reluctance to accept such conclusions. That's because of many, many lifetimes of sense gratification. So therefore, at least in this one lifetime, we have to strive to always be connected to Krishna. So, Nirbande, Krishna Sambande, one becomes detached from everything material by becoming attached to Krishna. So, this is a great art. So then, unfortunately, you have professional reciters of Srimad Bhagavatam. And people think if they go to a 7-day Saptaha, Bhagavat Saptaha, they will get, they're not really expecting to become detached from material life. They're just going to be entertained and hearing all these pastimes of Krishna for 7 days. So that is not real Shravanam Kirtanam. It looks like it. It may sound like it, but it's not the real thing, because everything depends on the consciousness of the person who is speaking and the consciousness of the person who's hearing. So if both the speaker and the hearer have attachment to material things for sense gratification, there's no real understanding that's going to take place. So we do have these expert reciters of Bhagavatam in India and around the world now. They will recite different pastimes, and people are more entertained than purified. Therefore, as soon as the Saptaha, or the 7 days, are over, they go back to their mundane life again, and nothing has changed. Okay, so this great art of using everything in Krishna's service is not something that is ordinary. And we began to hear a lot about this yesterday, where it says, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasad Paya Bhaktalakti Bija. We heard about Bhakti Bija, the seed of devotional service planted through the ear into the heart of the devotee by association with pure devotees. And once this seed is planted, then Nitya Siddha Krishna Bhakti Sadhyakabunai Shravanadi Sudha Chitta Karaya Udai. Our dormant transcendental knowledge of Krishna is awakened. It's dormant because we have forgotten for so many lifetimes our relationship with Krishna. But now that flame is lighted again, that quest is, we have a taste for it, to reestablish our relationship with Krishna, function in that relationship, and eventually develop love of God and go back to Godhead. So yesterday we heard some really wonderful things about the Bhakti Lata Bija, and what happens is that normally in material life, instead of getting the Bhakti Lata Bija, we get the Microsoft Bija, or we get the Amazon Bija, or we get the Sex Life Bija, or we get this Bija or that Bija. Bija meaning seed. The seed of all these mundane things are planted in the heart by modern advertisement, by movies, just like my sister-in-law was a IRS, was a secretary for an IRS executive, a tax collector executive, and she was a smoker. She would smoke every day, And eventually she got emphysema, which means you smoke so much that it ruins your lungs and you can hardly breathe. So then she had to carry around all the time an oxygen tank. Otherwise she would die. So for like 20 years she had this oxygen tank, and at that time it was a big tank. You had to have like a wheelbarrow to carry it around with you. And nowadays they have these smaller, much more easily handled oxygen tanks. But before she had to have this big thing. And one day I asked her, I said, how did you get interested in smoking? Because she smoked for about 30, 40 years before her lungs were ruined. And she said, oh, in the 1940s, when I was a young girl, I went to the movies, and I saw Clark Gable smoking Humphrey Bogart smoking a cigarette. And it looked so cool the way he was hanging down from his lips like this, and smoke was going up like that. And I thought it was so cool, I started to smoke. Well, yeah, the cigarette companies paid Humphrey Bogart, Clark Gable, and all these big movie stars to smoke on the big screen and make it look as if this is normal. So the cigarette bija was planted in her heart, and she couldn't get it out of her heart. And even after she is on this oxygen tank, the desire to smoke was still there. So all these bijas are being planted by the demons, but therefore there are many more demons than devotees. So most people get all these mundane bijas planted in the heart, and they get attached to it the rest of their life, and therefore next life they take birth as animals or even lower, because they've missed the boat of transcendental life. So here it says, being situated in one's heart and being watered by Shravanam Kirtana, the bhakti creeper grows more and more. In this way, it attains the shelter of the desire tree of the lotus feet of Krishna, who is eternally situated in the planet known as Goloka Vrindavana, in the topmost region of the spiritual sky. So, by receiving the Bhakti Lata Bija, the seed of devotional service, and then watering it and protecting it by not associating with nonsense people, associating only with the devotees and regular hearing and chanting, that seed sprouts and starts growing, this transcendental plant, and that goes eventually right through the whole material world, right through the Brahma Jyoti, right through even Vaikuntha, right to Goloka Vrindavan, and sprouts or blossoms into beautiful flowers and fruits offered at the lotus feet of Krishna. So that should be our striving in life to protect this seed of devotional service and let it grow. So there's an interesting parable in the Bible that Jesus makes, and it's about 3 different men who receive different benedictions. So let's say one of them receives 1 talent, which is like a currency in ancient times. Another person received 5 talents. Another person received 100 talents. And after some years, the person who gave them those talents goes and meets them again and sees what happens. So with one of them, he said, well, I was very cautious, so I buried the talents that I got in a hole in the ground for safekeeping. And here they are. So in other words, he did not multiply the talents. He just kept them, and without using them. And then the second one said, well, yeah, you gave me so many talents, and I've doubled it over that time. And then the third one said, well, you gave me so many talents, and I've increased them 1,000 times. So that's an interesting proverb or story by Jesus. It just shows that all of us are given this human body, and all of us have a chance to use the body in the service of Krishna. And some people don't do anything with it other than eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Other people do a little bit. And some people do everything they can to use their body, mind, senses, all these assets that we have in the service of Krishna, and they go back to Godhead. So there's a reckoning. Yes, you received this body, you received, these senses. What did you do with them? And if someone said, oh, well, I had a lot of sense gratification in my life, tremendous amount of sense gratification. Okay, well, you're a failure. So you don't need a human body. Next life you get this cockroach body, because you're like a cockroach. You spent your life like a cockroach, just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And another person says, well, I was in the middle of the road. Sometimes I would do nonsense, sometimes I would do some nice things. Okay, well, maybe in 1,000 lifetimes you'll get a human body again. And another person said, well, I became really serious by associating with devotees, and I've spent my whole time hearing and chanting and engaging in devotional service. And of course, I had a full life. I had a husband or a wife and children and house and all these things, but I was not really attached to any of these things because I was using them all in Krishna's service. And now, as I got older, I've given up all attachments to these things and completely surrendered to the Lord. Well, that person goes back to Godhead, you see. So it depends what you're going to do with these assets that you receive. Either you can use them in Krishna's service, or you can use them because different bijas were planted in your heart. You use them for mundane things, and therefore you missed the whole purpose of human life. So it says here, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Tabirya Eva Nijarupaya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasat Akilatma Bhuto Govinda Madhi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. He resides in his own realm, Goloka, with Radharani, who resembles his own spiritual figure and who embodies the ecstatic potency Haladini. Their companions are her confidants, who embody extensions of her bodily form and who are imbued with and permeated with ever-blissful spiritual rasa. This is the consciousness of the devotee, who is constantly hearing and chanting and associating with sadhus and is using everything in their life in the service of Krishna. They have this vision and they worship Krishna. So Prabhupada says, in the spiritual world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has expanded himself by his spiritual potency. He has his eternal form of bliss and knowledge, Satchitananda Vigraha. Everything in Goloka Vrindavan planet is a spiritual expansion of Satchit Ananda, eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Everyone there is of the same potency, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. They're enjoying their relationship, or they're engaged in their relationship with Krishna, and eternally and unceasingly. The relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his servitor is Chinmaya Rasa, transcendental rasa. Krishna and his entourage and paraphernalia are of the same Chinmaya potency. In this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is expanded throughout the spiritual world, and when the Chinmaya Rasa potency expands through the material potency, it becomes all-pervading. The idea is that although the Supreme Personality of Godhead exists on his own planet, Goloka Vrindavana, he is also present everywhere. Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam. He is present within all the universes, although they are innumerable, and he is also present within the atom. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridye se rijuna tistati. He is also present within the heart of all living entities. This is his all-pervasive potency. So as soon as we decide to use everything in the service of Krishna and become attached to Krishna, and give up false attachment to all these material things that surround us, we begin to have a vision of Krishna, and we suddenly realize Krishna is everywhere. It's not that you have to go back to Godhead to see Krishna. You can see him right now. We are seeing him every day right now, right? And we can also perceive him in our own heart. This is the reason why devotees become happy, because they're always seeing Krishna. They're not exactly seeing the material things. They're seeing the relationship of everything to Krishna by using everything in Krishna's service correctly. So, Goloka Vrindavan is the highest planet in the spiritual world. In order to go to the spiritual world after penetrating the covering of the material universe, one must penetrate Brahmaloka, the spiritual effulgence. So Brahmaloka, in this context, is not talking about Brahma's planet. It's talking about the Brahma Jyoti. That's also Brahmaloka, referred to as Brahmaloka. Then one can come to the Goloka Vrindavan planet. There are also other planets in the spiritual world called Vaikuntha planets, and on these planets Lord Narayana is worshipped with awe and veneration. On these planets Santarasa is prevalent. And some of the devotees are also connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Dasyarasa, the mellow of servitorship, as far as the mellow of fraternity is concerned. In Vaikuntha, this rasa is represented by Gaurava Sakya, friendship in awe and veneration. The other fraternity rasa exhibited is Vishramba, friendship in equality, is found in the Goloka Vrindavana planet. So the Sri Vaishnavas, the sincere ones who actually follow the rules and regulations and are always engaged in devotional service for Lord Vishnu, they can attain this Gaurava Sakya relationship. This is the lower relationship, friendship relationship with Krishna. Or they are enjoying, or they are experiencing the Santarasa, this somewhat neutrality, just like in the spiritual world, there's grass, there are trees, there are birds, and all these different species are there also, and they're more in Santarasa, just enamored by the thought of the Lord. But when you go to Dasyarasa, you begin to actually engage in personal relationship, ecstatic personal relationships with the Lord through service, through friendship, through parental love or conjugal love. Okay, so therefore, the other fraternity rasa exhibited is Vishramba, friendship and equality. Well, that's in Goloka, where the cowherd boys, they feel as if they're equal or superior to Krishna. See? And is found in Goloka Vrindavan planet. Above that is service to the Lord in Vatsalya rasa, parental love, and above that is the relationship with the Lord in Madhurya rasa, conjugal love. These five rasas are fully exhibited in the spiritual world in one's relationship with the Lord. Therefore, in the spiritual world, the bhakti creeper finds its resting place at the lotus feet of the Lord. Now we have these same type of relationships in the material world, but not in the mode of transcendental experience. It becomes mundane because there's no Krishna involved. It's simply we're seeking Krishna, but we end up. It's just like Columbus was seeking India, but he ended up with the West Indies. Right? So we're seeking Krishna, but we end up with these mundane relationships that are perverted reflections of the real rasas that are in the experienced in the spiritual world. Well, we can also experience the real rasas here because Krishna is everywhere. He's not just in the spiritual world. In fact, it says, Naham tistanti vaikunte yoginam hridaya suva yatra gayanti mad bhakta tatra tistami Narada. He says, Oh Narada, he says, I am not in Vaikuntha, and I am not in the heart of the yogis, but I am in that place where my devotees are always chanting my glories. That's where I am situated. So, when we become convinced that we want to always chant the glories of Krishna, then Krishna is with us all the time. And we begin to taste these different rasas with the Lord according to our preference. And then at that point, the spiritual master will introduce us to one of the personal, let's say, residents of Goloka or Vaikuntha to teach us how to progress in that preference of rasa that we have. Okay, so this is all transcendental knowledge. This is something that differentiates a devotee from a non-devotee. The non-devotee is engaged in all kinds of mundane endeavors, and the genuine devotee is engaged in this transcendental consciousness of Krishna. Okay, so therefore, this giving up all attachment is a horrible thing if it's done like the Mayavadis, and it's a wonderful thing if it's done by devotees, because for the devotees, they transfer their attachment from mundane things to Krishna. And for the Mayavadis, they reject all relationships, including relationships with Krishna. So it's actually, they end up in a very strange space of either nothingness, like the Buddhists, or as little spirit sparks in the Brahmajyoti, from which they fall down because they have no standing with Krishna, or what's called locus standing. If you go out into space in the SpaceX rocket by Elon Musk, and you miss Mars, you just end up in empty space and you'll die, right? So that's what happens to the Mayavadis. They don't believe that there are Vaikuntha planets or Goloka, so they just end up in the Brahmajyoti floating around, and eventually they just need one little desire, material desire, and then they fall down again. So it's a useless labor. Therefore, we're hearing now what is the real thing. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Patibhavitabhis. This transcendental worship of Krishna and experiencing Krishna's presence everywhere in the material world, and the vision of the spiritual world through intense devotional service. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions? I forgot to recite the Guru Vastika. Anyway, we'll do it tomorrow. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you.